The Cafe Cruiser group used to only have two rules: be safe and be nice, but we had to add another: don't follow Russell. I think you'll understand why when you get to meet the man. Stepping up to the Cafe Cruiser microphone is my mate Russell Honnor. G'day, Rusty.
Hi, John. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Good to see you on the face. We'll stick this video up on the website too, so you can actually see who I'm talking to. You've got to slide your camera down so that you're not sort of looking like your chin's resting on the bottom of the screen, but you're coming in loud and clear. There you go. Look at that. What a good-looking man.
Yeah, and you're right. The rules don't follow Rusty. Yeah, it was kind of like, because they might, do they call me Random Rusty or something like that? Because every now and then I'll see something. Oh, that looks good. I'll just go down there because that looks more exciting than the boring old path that we're currently on.
Yeah. Look, most of my Cafe Cruiser mates are just placid. Let's follow along. Let's do what we're told types. But Rusty heads at 90 degrees to just about everything in life. But that's what makes him the remarkable man he is. I mean,
you're too kind.
I don't know anyone that gets as much fun out of your bike as you do, because and he's a real Jekyll and Hyde. I mean, he spends his weeks hammering out code for accounting software and things, and he's a civilized man. He's a well-polished cog in the corporate machine, but when he gets off the leash and onto his bike, you're a wild man.
You're too kind, mate.
And you're proud of it.
I don't know if any of that stuff's true, but it sounds good. We'll go with that.
He has an almost unnatural love affair with his bike. But riding with him's always an adventure. So how often do you ride?
Probably most days, actually. Weather depending. If the weather's good, I'll go out for a ride. In fact, sometimes I might go out for 2 rides in a day. Might go out in the first thing in the morning and then another one late at night. I did that last Friday. I just love riding so much. It puts a big silly grin on my face and brings out my inner 8-year-old. And if I'm out with my mates, they get sick to death of hearing me tell them how beautiful I think Auckland is and how lucky we all are to be able to go out riding in this beautiful city that we live in. And it's a real joy to me.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. You post your rides up on Facebook, or you send them to me anyway. I get them in the email after you've been on your ride. And it's not so much you're crashing around on mountain tracks and trails. You're riding around the city. Is there enough in the city to actually entertain a cyclist every day?
Yeah, well, hats off to our Auckland Council for creating such good rides all around Auckland, and they're constantly improving them as well. Although having said that, over lockdown, I think I've cycled pretty much everywhere there is to cycle in Auckland. I'm getting a little bit ready to go and explore other areas, right? Let's say,
right.
Which I haven't done, of course, because we're in lockdown. But no, there's so many good places. There's lots and lots of cycle paths around. Interesting places. One of my favourite rides is I live in Meadowbank, but a short ride out from me is out to Point England, and then there's a lovely cycle path along the coast of Point England down to Panmure Bridge. You cross the Panmure Bridge, and then there's I think probably the best ride in all of Auckland, which is called the Rotary Pathway, and that follows the coastline from the Panmure Bridge up to Half Moon Bay, and then you can go from Half Moon Bay from there up to I think it's Bucklands Beach and then Music Point. And that's spectacularly beautiful. It's a shared pathway between cyclists and pedestrians, so I always make sure I ring my bell when needed and be polite and slow down. And it's very, very good, very beautiful. You want to do it when the tide's high, though. When the tide's out, it's not so flash. Yeah,
when the tide's out, you've got to sort of do some mental photoshopping, don't you?
That's right, you do.
Unless you find mud flats really, really attractive, but when the tide's in it, it's spectacular.
Yeah.
What makes a great ride for you? When you say you got this grin, what sort of elements on a ride make it good? Does it have to be something new, something you haven't done before?
Not necessarily. I think it's a combination of things. Going out for a ride with one of your mates or with the Cafe Cruisers is always good. That's very sociable. Obviously the weather. So I did that Rotary Pathway last week with my dear wife and some good friends, Alistair and Tanya, and the weather was spectacular, and the tide was right in, and it was wonderful. And I did it again today just on my own, and it was very blustery and windy, and the tide was out quite a lot. It was still good, but it wasn't as good.
Right. Are you one of these guys that likes to set yourself a challenge? Are you working up to some type of goal? Do you keep track of the miles that you do and stuff like that?
Not really. Oh, yes, I do have a goal. So, first of all, let's just set the scene. I cheat, right? I've got an electric bike.
Okay.
And so my goal is to get home before the battery runs out. And my bike weighs 35 kg, and I live in Meadowbank, not far from the mall, and it's, as you pointed out, one of the highest points in Auckland.
Yeah, it's at the top of the Auckland Alps, we'll say. You have to go on top of a volcanic cone to get somewhere higher than where your place is up on Meadowbank there. So, yeah, it'd be a hard ride back home without a battery.
Well, on a bike that weighs 35 kgs plus my weight and soft tyres and everything, because it's a semi-mountain bike. So that's something that I have learnt to manage. In fact, today's ride, I did 67 k's today. And I got part way around and I was looking at my map. I'll tell you about my map app in a minute. But I was looking at my map and I thought, oh yeah, I could extend it and go around this extra bit here. And then I looked at my amount of percentage of battery left. I got 40% left. And I thought, yeah, I think I can just make that. Well, I learned to manage my battery by turning it off on the flats and on the downhills, and then keeping it on the lowest setting if I think I'm only going to make it. And today the battery ran flat just as I got to the supermarket car park, which is about 200 metres from my house. So
perfect timing. Perfect timing.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Have you ever been stranded without power on your bike?
A couple of times in the early days when I first, and then it's just you put it in a low gear and you grind it up the hill.
Okay, so tell us about your bike, because I know there's people riding in the cruisers on e-bikes that cost literally thousands of dollars less than your one. Your one, it's a beautiful bike. What are you riding?
I'm riding a giant, I think it's an MT1, full suspension mountain bike. So full suspension, that means it's got springs at the back for the back wheel as well as the front wheel, right. Which means you get a much softer ride on it. It's got quite wide 2.6 inch tyres on it, not knobbly tyres. So if I want to go what I call off-piste, so I off onto a rough area, and there's some areas around not far from my neighbourhood that are a bit like that. There's a Pakuranga Creek. That's one particular part. No, it's not that. It's a Point England Creek, I think it is. There's a creek. There's a track, and it's a trail. It's like a mountain bike trail, and so I can just zoom in around there, and it's quite rough, but I manage it no problem on my bike.
So nothing terrifies you. There's no terrain you've seen that you think, oh, I couldn't take my bike there.
Yes,
you're the limiting factor, not the bike.
Yes, so I've been known to ride up Mount Wellington often, and you can ride up the road to Mount Wellington. But there's also you're not supposed to, but I might on the
don't ride rusty.
Right up to the tripod at the top. And that's quite a challenging ride to get up to it because it's quite steep. But on the other side coming down, there's some scoria and there's some drops in the scoria where it's all crumbling. And I don't ride that. I just get off my bike and walk it down. A real cyclist might do that. But
is a mountain bike good for riding around the cities? There's bikes that are sold that as sort of city bikes. But you're riding something that looks like you could pull tree stumps out with it. It looks so powerful, and it's okay for riding around the city.
It's not quite that powerful, but it's definitely more powerful than the bike I had before. So I had a Smart Motion bike before this one, which is quite common in a lot of commuter bikes. It's got the motor mounted in the rear hub wheel, and it's a different system than the current bike. I've got my giant bike has got quite a powerful Yamaha engine that's in the crank, and it pulls 80 Newton meters. I don't know what that means, but anyhow, when I get back on my other old bike, it's like, oh, I've sold tractor after being on a sports car. And so Yes, and on my old bike, I used to keep breaking spokes on it, and I'd take it to my bike mechanic, and I'd break spokes because I'd just ride off the footpath, and there'd be a bit of a drop there. And my bike mechanic said to me, "Why don't you get a full suspension mountain bike?" I said, "Oh yeah, okay." And yeah, it cost about twice as much. It was about $5,500 3 years ago, and it was the previous year's model, so it was a bit cheaper. But you could spend up to $11,000 or $13,000 on a bike like
Wow.
that now if you wanted to.
Heroin is probably a cheaper hobby than cycling once you get the bug, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe not good for you though, John.
No, it's look, I've tried to keep up with you on rides, and you can go really, really fast. Do you tend to go as fast as you can, or do you just like pottering?
Depends on my mood. It depends on the mood and.
Perhaps when I'm riding with you, you're just wanting to get away.
No, not at all. No, but it's interesting because I did a ride a few weeks ago with my wife, and she was on a bike similar to my old bike, another Smart Motion that's also got the motor and the hub. And I forgot that she couldn't keep up with me on the really steep bits. There's a few steep bits that we were riding on. And my bike, I just put in the low gear, power it up, and it just grinds up the hill with me giving assistance, of course. It's not a motorbike. You still need to put effort in. And I think actually I'm quite fit as a net result of that, because at the end of my ride I'm often sweating and puffing and during my ride. So you do definitely get exercise on them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing about e-bikes, isn't it? I mean, people say, oh, the bike does all the work. No, it doesn't. I mean, you can go out on a ride on an e-bike and expend just as much energy as you do on a push bike. It's just that you've gone further and faster and enjoyed the hills more. Yeah. But how do you find all your rides? Because that's one of the things I enjoy about looking at the rides that you've done. I thought, I didn't know there was a path there, a track there. How do you actually find them?
Well, that's part of my don't follow rusty inquisitive nature. I think, oh, I wonder what's over there, and sometimes I'll just ride down it and see. But most of the time, I use this wonderful app that you've heard me rabbit on about. It's called,
I'll just go and make a cup of tea while Rusty talks about
I'll be here for half an hour.
favourite cycling app.
It's called Komoot, Komoot, and it's wonderful. Most bikes like Strava and Map My Ride will tell you what you have done, whereas Komoot will help you plan the ride that you're going to do. And so with Komoot you can open up the app on your phone, or I actually do it on my computer, and I plan the ride on Komoot, and it shows you all of the, not just the roads, but the cycle paths, and even you can also use it for hiking and walking if you wanted to, but I use it for riding. And if you tell it that you want to use it for riding, it shows you the bits that you can go on. And then you just plan your ride. You say, I want to go from here to there, and it'll work it out for you. And then you drag and drop the route to say, oh, I also want to include that bit over there, and it'll work it all out for you. And then when you're out, and you do that on your computer, and then you save it, and then you open the same thing up on your phone. And I've got a phone mount on my handlebars of my bike, and it will tell you turn-by-turn instructions and a picture of the map, and it'll say turn right and 150 metres down this road, for example, or onto that path. Occasionally it gets it wrong, and you end up thinking, oh, geez, what do I do now? And if you ride off somewhere else, it'll say the next closest bit is in this direction. So, yeah, I use that all the time.
Yeah. And after your ride?
Oh, yes, that's right. And it also records your ride for you. If you take pictures while you're on your ride, you can publish your ride together with some of the pictures and share it with your friends as well.
Okay. So do you find it makes it more fun for you? Or, I mean, obviously it's useful knowing where you're going to ride and not getting lost, but do you actually find it makes it more fun for you?
Yeah, definitely, because if you do the same ride all the time, it gets a little bit boring. So this just helps you find new paths that you didn't know existed.
Right. Now, you've got me onto using Komoot, and I want to say two things again it. You're the biggest fan of it. I'll just say two things. One is that if you change your mind, and decide to cut across and take a shortcut that wasn't on the map, but you join up the path again that you were on, it doesn't seem to be able to get its little head out of the fact that you haven't ridden every metre of the path that it planned for you. It keeps on saying, do a U-turn or turn back, and trying to get me back onto the path that I should have been on.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because in my ride today, I started that. I planned my ride out, and I got 3/4 of the way, or 2/3 of the way through it, and I decided I think I might just go off down here. So I got my little app out, and you just use your finger on the map, and you say point onto it, and it says it's set as new destination. So there's a few tricks to learning how to use it. Or you could just start a completely new plan, and saying from my starting point, I want to go to X, and you do another one.
I tried loading a couple of your maps into Komoot, and it kept on saying, don't follow Rusty.
Yes, it knows. Yeah.
Hey, you when you're not locked down and working at home, you work in the city, and it's quite a decent distance from your place up on the mountains of where you live down to where you work. You've got a perfectly good car.
Yep.
There's a bus service, but you choose to ride in the rush hour traffic. Playing with the big trucks and buses and things.
Yes.
What's that?
Yes. No. I have this theory that if there's a safe footpath that nobody's using, it's mine.
Yeah.
And yes, you're correct. I do commute to work. I'm in Meadowbank, and I commute to Mount Eden.
What's that, about 5 or 6K? Or
but the shortest route, yes. But who wants to do the shortest route? That's a bit boring. And so
that's the thing. I've been miles off that direct route, and you say, oh yeah, I ride this way to work sometimes. I thought, how could this possibly be on your way to work?
It's probably more I ride that way home, because I can take a bit longer going home. The shortest route would be along Remuera Road, but that, as you know, that's a busy route. So there's other routes I can take, and there's some bike paths I can do. And I will definitely ride on the footpath. I'm always very respectful to the pedestrians and make sure that there's no possibility of me hitting them, and I'll either stop, or I ring my bell so they know I'm there, or I'll go back onto the road and then back onto the footpath. Not that I ride the footpath all the time, but that's an option if it's a busy road. And then there might be some bits, like I get to one bit that's a bit higher up, and I'll look and wait for a space where there's no cars, and then I'll zoom down the hill doing 50 plus kilometres an hour, which means the cars behind you you're not slowing them down. And the other thing is, pre-lockdown, if I was riding on the road, I was often the fastest thing on the road, because with all the roadblocks everywhere, all the cars are stacked up behind each other. They're doing 15 kilometres an hour, and I'm zooming past them at 25.
So if you do take the fastest route, does your commute take about the same time as when you were driving?
Yeah, all shorter. I can ride quicker than I can drive in, basically.
Yeah, right. And when you are in heavy traffic, are there any tips or tricks that you find? Apart from avoiding the heavy traffic, if you do find yourself in traffic, what do you do?
Be safe, be seen. That's the golden rule. So as you know, I wear bright orange clothing everywhere I go. I cannot believe the number of people on push bikes that I see who are wearing grey and black, and on a black bike on a grey dark background with maybe, and it's just
black is high vis, but only in snow.
Correct, that's right. So that's the first thing. I have a red flashing light on the back of my helmet. And I've also got other lights that I put on if it gets to be a bit dark or towards dark, and so I think it's reasonably safe. But I have another rule, and I often say this to people: I ride like everyone's trying to get me. So I'm constantly looking left, right, and a rear vision mirror. That's another thing I have on my bike on the end of my handlebar. I managed to whack one of those off. It's this little cheap plastic thing I got from AliExpress, and I've got a box of about 30 of them now, because I whack one off every 3 or 4 weeks, and I just slap another one on. But that's a very important thing for me, having a rear vision mirror, and always assuming that they're out to get you, and so ride defensively. Okay.
Hey, you ride on your own, you commute, but you also join us on the Cafe Cruiser rides. You've been tagging along you're an integral part for years now. I don't know when you first started doing your rides, but one of the things you told me is you never want to lead. You don't want to lead groups, but I have pushed my knee into your throat and forced you to lead a couple of times, and you do it very well.
Oh, thanks.
You do it very well, but you have admitted that it's a bit of a different thing when you know that there's people going to be following you. What are sort of the challenges?
Well, the thing is, I have to be more responsible. That's the worst thing about it. I think you've mentioned it, sometimes it can be a bit like herding cats. In fact, I'm probably the worst cat in your whole herd, right?
I won't say.
Of course I am.
This is my revenge. I'm making you be the leader.
Oh,
so
but also when we're riding and you say to the rest of the group that don't follow Rusty, I explain to them, look, I'm on my own bike ride today, which may or may not coincide with most of the cafe cruisers ride. But leading the ride's not too bad. I mean, we've got a wonderful group of people. They're all pretty much like-minded and they all love cycling and they're all a bit older and greyer like we are. So they've been around the blocks a few times and, that's good. It's a nice social thing.
Hey, just a couple of things. Outside of Auckland, what's your favourite ride?
Well,
You've toured around the country a little bit doing a bit of cycling. What would be your favourite?
Well, I haven't done as much as some of the others. Like a lot of the others have done the South Island and have done some wonderful things. I keep thinking, I wished I could do that. I've got to do that at some stage. But I was born and brought up in Hawke's Bay, so we go back to Hawke's Bay every now and then. And as you know, John, we've done with the Cafe Cruises, there's a wonderful ride that they do out of there. I think it's most Easters, or it hasn't been the last few because of lockdown. But it's called the Big Easy, and it starts in Hastings. And then it goes out to the coast and along the coast and into Napier and then down into Taradale. And then they finish it off with a big concert at the end of it.
That's why you like it, because you're an old rocker, aren't you?
Yeah, I
am. You love the concert at the end. Yeah. But I've also seen you post videos of riding down Tomato Peak.
Yes, done the Tomato Peak ride. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
It doesn't look cool. It looks terrifying.
Oh, well, that's where you wouldn't do it on a street bike. And... and ride within your capabilities. So
okay.
What else is good? Queenstown. Obviously, there's some spectacular rides around Queenstown. The Hamilton River, surprisingly, is actually very pleasant as well.
Isn't it? It's lovely. And you've also done some rides overseas.
Yes.
I'm going to come back on another program, another podcast, and talk specifically about planning trips overseas. But you did you've done a couple of trips in Europe on your bike.
Yeah, so as you know, one of my other passions is cruising on big cruise boats, and
So you cycle around the cruise?
Yeah. No, my wife and I often go on a cruise, or have been on a number of cruises. The Mediterranean is my favourite place to go. And one of the things I like about cruising in the Mediterranean is you hop on this wonderful boat and it's like a floating hotel, and you get looked after spectacularly, and you do all your travel at night. You travel in your sleep, as opposed to a coach tour where you're spending 8 hours of your day in the coach, and you get to somewhere and you're out. You stop somewhere beautiful and you're there for 2 hours, and then it's all right back on the coach. Whereas on a cruise, you're travelling in your sleep, so it's wonderful. You wake up, look out the window, and you say, "Oh, we're in a fantastic place." Get up, have fantastic food, and then if you're clever, you've organised to meet some operator on shore, and it will take you for a spectacular ride around the coast or up the mountains or something. One of the wonderful places we did is Kotor in Montenegro, which is a bit south of Dubrovnik. There's a spectacular harbour that goes, it's almost a fjord, I guess you would say. It's quite deep inland, and you wake up there and there's very high hills around there. One year, Kerry and I, we met up with a tour operator there who had some really nice e-bikes, and we rode right to the top of the hill and had these spectacular views down through the harbour, and then down the other side and around the coast past all the super massive launches and the rich list boats. It was just wonderful. And
Rusty, I also know that you've done the Loire Valley, and
yes.
I think that looks like such a fantastic trip that I'm going to do a special podcast or something talking to you and the other 3 or 4 cafe cruisers that joined you on that ride. It looked absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
The pictures you were posting, I couldn't talk to you for months afterwards. I was so envious. Mate, good talking with you, and it's always a pleasure having you on the rides. I think that people, if they did decide to follow Rusty, would probably find they had a lot of fun, but because you're always finding new and interesting tracks and things like that. But just absolutely finally, what do you think cycling has done for you as a man in your middle ages? We'll say that. What's it do for you?
It's kept me fit. It's very good for your, not just your physical health, but your mental health for me. And like I said, it puts a big silly grin on my face. So, what more can I say?
Rusty, great talking with you. Thanks for being part of this podcast.
No worries. Thanks, John. See ya.